Crush the Head.
All right, hey, welcome to Crush the Head. My name's Mitch. We're going to be talking to various topics, specifically Christmas and the state of the nation, getting into politics. Here we have Jake Grant from SkibaNewsNation. He's also the lead singer of Simply Prodigal. And some of you already know Jerry to his right. We just recently did a sit-down with him. He's one part of Sanctified Supply Co. He and his wife, Lucia, sat down with me and Johnny and gave us a little bit of the story. And, of course, Johnny to his right. How's it going, man? Johnny is a new father as of, 15 days?
2 weeks ago to the day, yeah.
Awesome. Right on, man. So, before we get started, is there anything that's going on with Sanctified that you want to, that's new, that you want to...
Yeah, I guess we opened up to do wholesales recently, which is new for us. We've been doing exclusively our own merch and collaboration merch with other influencers up until recently. So that's new. One of our new collaborations is we're printing the YHWH shirt for Ancient Path. So that's my new favorite shirt on the lineup. But yeah, other than that, just plugging away.
Okay, right on. So before we get into this topic, I just want to kind of say that this topic is controversial. Actually, both of them are, politics and Christmas. Christmas was a month back, but I kind of wanted to get into it without it being fresh, during the time. I think a lot of people talk about Christmas during the time, and it's you don't see a lot of fruit. It's just a lot of arguments back and forth. And so there's no condemnation from this panel, whatever you want to call it, just talking. We just want to discuss it, without bringing judgment or condemnation to anyone. So let's talk about Christmas. So December 25th.
I noticed during this season going through it, a lot of people softening towards the topic and a lot of people kind of being reinvigorated with their convictions. I will say the slippery slope on both sides of the aisle was those who are softening their outward spokenness against Christmas and that season. Unfortunately, it seems like they're giving a lot of people an excuse to go back to the beggarly elements of the world. But to go from a knowledge of these things are not based in truth and to return to them, I think is very alarming to some people because it was very eye-opening for us to realize that Christ wasn't born in Christmas and to stand in truth. It's hard to understand why people want to return to that. And of course, the justification being, they want to be a better witness. They want to have, those warm family moments with family and friends that are celebrating Christmas still. And I guess the argument could be made, we should be making those memories based on things that are scripturally sound. But then the other side of the equation, I think the extreme of people who are being reinvigorated to speak out against Christmas is when we call the observance of something a sin, we have to be very careful of being vague. We don't want to be vague when we talk about what's right and wrong. And Christmas is really a season that we can't avoid. And so when we talk about the interactions with families around the season, there's a lot of kind of gray area. Do you just not go near family during the whole month of December? Or is it specifically the eve of Christmas that is the participation in the festival that we disagree with? It's something that, it calls for a conversation because it really is the culture of Babylon that has caused us to reject and forget the feast of the Almighty found in Leviticus 23. And so that's why it is an important topic, because the culture that we foster with our children, the memories we make with our children, and those associations that they make with their belief system is like the core of what builds a strong family. And my hope would be that we build those around, the biblical feast, Leviticus 23 feast, and not something that they can say, look, Jesus wasn't born on December 25th. So does that mean he didn't even exist? And I think that's the biggest concern for me.
It's very difficult with family around this time of year because I grew up doing Christmas, obviously, and it's hard because they're all doing it, they're all partaking in it, and it's really hard to kind of set boundaries, and what those boundaries should be. And I think it's like a learning process as you go. There's a lot of when Christmas comes around, it's one of the most annoying times of year, but it's not even because of the people who celebrate Christmas. Oftentimes it's people in the Torah observant community that every post is literally it's pagan, and it's very, very accusatory. It's not in a way of sharing truth and light. It's just more of, you're sinners, we're better than you. At least it comes off like that. And I find it difficult to interact with both sides during that time, because on one side, I'm defending the Torah of Scripture, of the Father, right? And at the same time, I'm kind of defending Christians from Torah Nazis, if that's what you want to call them. But a lot of people will say it's Nimrod's birthday, or they have all kinds of different, there's so many different
origin stories.
Yeah. And so I try not to even make it about that. For me, it's, let's just break it down in the basics of what's going on in this current climate. And so December 25th, obviously there's some winter solstice things going there. When you logically look at it, Ecclesiastes 1 verse 9 says there's nothing new under the sun. And so there's going to be arguments of people who say the Christmas tree is not what was discussed in Jeremiah 10, and shepherds could have been out in the field, and I don't see how necessarily that is if shepherds were out in the middle of the field on a cold winter night. That doesn't seem plausible. But also it's very possible that, yes, it's not talking about the Christmas tree in Jeremiah 10. But when I read that, and this was years ago, this was when I was still celebrating Christmas, I looked at that and I was like, man, that sounds like a Christmas tree. And so even if it wasn't, the fact that made me think of that, and it's not like I had a biased belief at that moment anyway. I just read it and I was like, man, that really sounds like a Christmas tree. And even if it's not, it's just one step removed, because you may not be carving into it, but you're still bringing a tree in and you're decorating it. And really, I wanted to get into the specific traditions, and before we'll even talk about the tree, gifts. Let's talk about gifts in general. I have no issue with people giving gifts to each other, but in today's society, it has become such a, it's a corporate, like, you have to do it. You get what I'm saying? Like, I see so many people feel obligated that they have to give a Christmas gift, or if they receive one, they have to give somebody one. So what do you guys think about that?
In regards to Christmas, I don't, I've asked my family not to give us gifts, and we're certainly not going to be participating in the gift giving on Christmas. Giving gifts in general, I think, is a great thing. I think it's nice, especially for no reason. It's nice to give a gift, for no occasion, just because. I think that those are the best gifts that are not they're not scheduled, if you will. And so that's for me in my household. Other people may operate differently. That's fine. But yeah, we don't participate in any of it, gift giving or otherwise.
Sorry, I'm kind of getting over something right now. I kind of hold the same view. I know that maybe this isn't on the same topic as giving gifts necessarily. I know a few years ago my family had a get together for Christmas, and they all kind of know that I'm the only one that doesn't participate in that. I just waited until the Christmas festivities were done, and then I went and just visited with people. So definitely nothing wrong with visiting with family. No one even offered me a gift. In fact, I walked in and one of my nephews said, "Oh, guys, he actually came." So they were kind of almost surprised to see me there. But I just hope that kind of planted the seeds like, oh, he doesn't participate in this holiday, but he still took time to come visit us. And some of them were telling me, "Oh, here's what I got for Christmas." And I was just like, "Oh, cool." So there's really no awkward, tense Christmas discussion there because they all knew and we were just being civil, really. So,
So do you guys know who David Wilbur is?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
All right, so he has an article that I saw he put out around this time, around Christmas time anyway, and it was Christians celebrate Christmas, and he goes into it, and I will share that with you guys, at least part of it. There's one consideration that people have when they begin to question whether they should celebrate Christmas is the claim that it has pagan origins. Is this true? The answer to that question is a definite, absolute maybe. The truth is that the origins of Christmas are uncertain. When you look into the topic, you'll discover different credible theories. Some historians have suggested that certain Christmas symbols and customs were adopted from practices associated with various pagan holidays. However, it should be noted that other scholars and researchers have disputed these popular claims. After studying what scholars say about the origins of Christmas, if one becomes convinced that the holiday is indeed mixed with pagan customs, an argument could be made that one should reject the holiday from that basis. God commands us not to imitate the ways of the pagans in our worship of Him. Deuteronomy 12, verses 29 through 32, and 18, verses 9 through 12, as well as 20, verses 17 through 18. Thus, it could be argued that incorporating traditions that were associated with pagan celebrations into our celebration of Messiah's birth would be offensive to the Lord. This argument is perhaps worthy of prayerful consideration. Many Christians have decided that they do not have peace participating in Christmas if there is a possibility that some traditions have their root in pagan celebrations. This isn't a legalistic attitude, but one that comes from a sincere heart to please God. Therefore, it should be respected. I kind of wanted to point, what he said right there at the end is that this isn't a legalistic attitude, but one that comes from a sincere heart to please God. Therefore, it should be respected. And so out of all the arguments, regardless if somebody feels or has read Scripture and they've come to the conclusion that they don't even want to chance it, one of the arguments, or the argument there, it seems like there's a lot of Christians who get offended. They immediately become defensive about, they're going to go ahead and celebrate Christmas, but when it comes to other people who don't want to, I think that respect goes both ways. And so I think there are people on one side that are like, hey, we feel attacked because you're coming at it aggressively. And then the other side is like, we feel like you guys are kind of ignoring some of these parts of Scripture. And why is it offensive to you if I don't want to partake in the celebration?
Yeah. The Christians today really need to recognize that not everything that seems good is godly. In fact, the Scriptures even tell us that Satan presents himself as an angel of light. And we're also reminded to test the spirits. And so it's almost that Christmas is such a blatant, in-your-face, base level kind of discernment check, because it literally has the spirit of Christmas tethered to it. And what is this spirit of Christmas? It's the warm fuzzies, the association with family, kindness, and togetherness. It's the good food. It's the corporatized kind of commercialization of the season where all of the coolest toys and everybody's encouraged to be giving, to leave these lasting imprints on the season. And so the Christmas spirit, if we were to sum it up and how it latches onto people and convinces them it is a good spirit, a spirit of giving, right? Is the danger, it's the deception that is really a litmus test for checking, because we want to base everything we do in truth as believers in the Scriptures and as followers of the Messiah, because the Spirit of the Almighty is synonymous with the Spirit of truth. And so we have to be double checking everything we do when we realize that we're participating in something that in its foundational, essence is inaccurate. It could lead people astray just by even making the, thought process go out to the masses that Christ was born on a day he provably was not. And so when a whole celebratory system is justified by practicing Christians by a falsity, that becomes alarming to me, because to me that says that this is in contradiction with the spirit of truth. And then on the flip side, you have just the secular observance of Christmas, and just this is people that have no unction to live a biblical lifestyle or to love their neighbor, no motivation, but they're still doing good during the season. And so they feel that warm feeling of, I'm being generous because it's Christmas, and so that's where you have this very deceptive season, it can pull people back so easily, because what's the big deal? It's good to give. It's good to love. It's good to be around family, but don't forget, Satan comes as an angel of light, and when it's a lie wrapped in gift wrapping,
when we say angel of light, it's a distracting light. It's not like an illuminating light in the context of showing or revealing truth. That would be the one word that I would use to describe all of Christmas or anything, is a distraction. There are so many things that distract us, because there's a lot of people who will argue, well, I only celebrate Jesus' birthday. And that's all good and well, but I don't see, once you take everything away, even that kind of starts to break down. As far as distractions go, I think every aspect of Christmas can be that. The obligation of buying gifts, the tree, Santa Claus, which should be the most obvious of the idols, as far as, because it's I think tree's pretty obvious too, but in a different context, not because I think that Jeremiah 10 might be referring to that. That's a subjective argument. So let's get into Santa Claus real quick. Santa Claus, when I was doing Christmas, I always thought that it was wrong, like at least most of my young adult life, because at the end of the day, when I think about it, if I make a character and I make him superpowered and he can do all these miraculous things, and I teach a kid about this miraculous character, even if the intent is not to bring harm, am I not causing my little ones to stumble if they are committing idolatry? They may be innocent in it because they don't understand, but I'm giving them an idol to worship, because you can't tell me that 5-year-old kids or whatever age, the excitement in their eyes, and they're like, oh, Santa's coming, and he's flying around the world in one day, and he's going to do all this stuff. And to me, and he knows if you've been good or bad, so you better be good. And it's like your behavioral modification to a child. Why would you change your behavior unless this is an idol?
You literally are teaching your kids about another God. Because I remember, like, my family even celebrated Christmas, we weren't even told about Santa, or any of that. So none of us ever believed in Santa, but we had cousins who did, and we would get into these like lively debates with them. It was awesome. Now I remember for one of my cousins literally at one point said, "Well, he's like God; he knows everything. Not even hidden." It's like, "Well, he's like God." Yeah.
So that's one of the biggest issues that I actually take with Christmas, is that you're associating the birth of our Messiah with lies, outward lies. These children are going to grow up. They're going to realize that they were lied to. It's what it is. It's not, it's not fantasy. It's a lie. Yeah. You're telling them that Santa's real. He's coming down the chimney. He's eating cookies and milk in your house at night. And
breaking and entering, I might add.
And it's all based on lies. So now they associate their Messiah, the true and living Son of Elohim, with a lie. And I think that that's one of the most destructive pieces of the whole scenario here.
It's a gateway drug to idolatry. I mean, and I know how people hear that, though. That's what I want to like boil down and be like, look, I get it. Like, you think we're being super judgy and harsh, and we're not opening ourselves up to the opportunity to minister to family, and we're even alienating people because we're talking about like the historical origins of Christmas, and some of them are a little bit, gray area because, there's so many different pantheons that all have something to do with December 25th. But I mean, in the end, our motivation should be, what culture are we creating in our home? Is it a biblical-based culture, or is it a culture of Babylon? And we can see that how the culture of Babylon is designed to suck resources from us, to distract us. And I love what, Mitch, you were saying in associating with this as the season of distraction. It's the time to bring us away and draw our resources out of us so that we're not spending those, funds celebrating Sukkot, or, sitting down with the family and doing biblical centered celebrations and events, because we've spent all of our vacation time on the Christmas season. We spend all our money on the presents. And so Babylon has been designed to vampire us. And people that break away from that are finding that there's like an enormous amount of extra time and resources and stuff. And so we should be inviting our family to things that we can point to in Scripture and say, this is based on truth. I celebrate the birth of Christ at Sukkot because that's one of the most likely times he was born. Please come and camp with us. Come, please celebrate. We want to, giving gifts even during those times, because what is Antichrist, right? Basically,
instead of.
It's not necessarily against. It can just be instead of doing this. It's a distraction. And the reason I brought up obviously the Santa Claus thing is because to me it is a blatant idolatry for kids. And it's not to come, like you said, this is not in any way a condemning. I have family and friends that I love that celebrate, like none of the people here discussing this topic, we don't go out of our way to just bash people for doing what we used to do. So we get it because, around here anyway, wintertime comes around, starts getting darker, which leads the whole, winter solstice thing. And then you make things fun, and I get it, because when things are fun, it can really it emotionally bonds us to whatever that thing may be. I don't even think Christmas is the worst offender. I think Easter is, and that is in my opinion. I think even though it's not celebrated as widely, but as far as of people in the faith, when we look at the Gospels, we see where Yeshua celebrated the Passover, and he was saying, "I hope you do this in remembrance of me," referring to the Passover. And so when we just completely ignore that and we're like, nah, we're going to do Easter and do a rabbit and hide some eggs, that really doesn't make any sense when you compare the two. But I think of the three holidays that at least most of the world, in our country anyway, our culture celebrates, we've got Christmas, Easter, and Halloween. Halloween is probably the most obvious of it's not even, yet you just join in.
I've actually always kind of half jokingly said out of those three secular holidays, I have more respect for Halloween because at least it doesn't masquerade as a holiday that honors our Creator. So
I don't know what kind of mental gymnastics do people got to do to be like, oh, we're doing trunk or treat at our church, so now it's okay. So
I saw this meme one time. This was years ago. It was a few years back. It was before I think I was even doing any of the biblical feast. It said trunk or treat is like a church asking strippers to come to the church so that you can attract more men into the church. and I like the comparison. Obviously, it's a pretty extreme comparison, but it kind of had a point. You're like, are you participating in something? That's the mixing of the seeds, right? It's like, that's why he says, don't worship me in the ways in which the nations worship their gods. Because I don't think that we need to make the Father more palatable. I think he's already palatable enough. And I think that comes to our own selfish flesh, the first commandment is in regard to don't worship any other gods, don't create another idol, right? Have any graven images. And I think that, and I remember having a conversation with somebody who was defending Easter, and they were like, people just go out and, they try to look for God in nature. And that was one of the things that the Old Testament, at least Deuteronomy, brings up, is that's how we create idols. Even if we're innocently the evergreen tree represents this, and then we make it more important than the actual creator. We start looking at the creation versus the Creator.
Right.
So a lot of these things are just distractions.
Yeah, it's even demonstrated in the fact that Christmas and Easter are generally the only 2 times a year that people go to church, if you think about it. And what does that demonstrate is that the God that they're going to church to worship is the God that forgives them and gives them gifts, right? And why do they go during those times? Well, that's when you have all your family kind of egging you on. So how can that be a bad thing? We're getting people into church, Christmas is actually, the biggest time for, altar salvations and whatnot. And so whenever we look at that and we think, all right, this modern age we live in, there's all these different distractions and elements to draw people into the church. And this is what I wanted to voice towards people that recently have come a little bit lax towards Christmas and are trying to use it as a witnessing tool. I believe this generation hungers for contrast. They're looking for the real. They don't want this cotton candy Christianity anymore. They want people to stand for what they believe in and speak truth unashamedly and unabashed. And I think this reminds me of the situation we have with the story of Elijah coming and confronting the children of Israel during the time where there was worship of Baal and idols, and they were mixing that worship with Yah. And there's even a passage that's really telling. He goes before all the people and he says, "How long will you be of 2 opinions? If Yahuwah, the Lord is God, worship him. But if Baal, then worship him." And I think that's what the people were doing at the time, is they were kind of integrating, but still holding on to this, I believe in the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Just like people who go to church on Christmas and Easter. I'm holding on to that belief. But the rest of the year, we demonstrate who we're actually worshiping by our practice, by our lifestyle. And so it really is telling that the world today has been divided by lackadaisical opinions, by not standing firm and drawing a line on this is based in truth and we'll hold tightly to that, and this is based in a lie and we're going to reject that. And I think because of that soft approach, it's actually causing people to be like, you guys don't really believe what you say. You don't really believe that this is idolatry because you're still coming to our house. You're still sitting in front of my tree. You're still sitting down and eating my meal that I've declared is an offering for Christmas, the Christmas dinner. And if you sit down and you're participating in that, are you participating in the meal offered to this? It could even be dedicated to Christ. But is it the Christ born on December 25th? Because that's not the Christ of the Bible. And that's a sobering, thing to think about.
Yeah, obviously there's, in this walk, you're going to you create your own boundaries, and you have to, work out your own salvation with fear and trembling. I had a family come down and visit that I don't ever see, rarely see, and they came down during the Christmas festivities. Obviously, I didn't do the Christmas festivities with them, but I still went and talked with them, and spent time with them because I love them, And so, again, I'll keep restating this. Like, I know there's a lot of people out there that get really gung-ho on these topics, and they're just, it's the truth, and you're pagan devils, and you're all going, and it's...
You have to speak the truth in love.
Yeah, right, and there's no kindness, and it's like, are you really more concerned with what you know, or do you actually love the individual that you're talking to? Because not too far back, we were all doing this stuff, so we can't just act like we're better, because we're not. Just because I keep the Sabbath or I don't do Christmas does not actually make me a better person. Mm-hmm. I've just come to an understanding where I look at I read Scripture, and I want to follow Him as best as I can and be obedient to Him, and so I just, if there's a chance that He doesn't like this, I should at least look into that, And so we were talking about distraction and the gifts and all the things that are spent during this time of year for Christmas. When we look at, that's what I look about the tree. I look at it in that aspect is the time that they spend on Christmas lights alone, but putting up trees everywhere. Every store, you even put fake gifts in fake boxes, and you can't tell me it's not an idol when it's become a symbolic, it's just everywhere. And people are like, well, it's not an idol. Well, why do you have a song called "Oh Christmas Tree"? It literally praises the tree itself. If you read the lyrics to that song, but at the end of the day, it's all of these things can be a distraction. And so for the people who I've met some people who genuinely, we don't do any of it. We just kind of like, it's Jesus' birthday. We don't do the gift or whatever, and that's all. It's all fair. It's like I said, there's a lot of subjective arguments for and against, but at the end of the day, culture, it's not even about Jesus at all. And you can't even say, even if you were to argue that he was born on this day or whatever, you still can't. Everything, it's about the Christmas tree. It's about the gifts. It's clearly about Santa Claus. I don't hear anybody talking about Jesus usually. I mean, yeah, you see people go to church and do the midnight service or whatever. But,
little nativity scene.
Yeah, but and really the nativity scene, I would be okay with that during Sukkot without the wise men, because the wise men weren't there until he was 2, And so they kind of just combined, threw it all together. But like I said, I want my family to know that I love them and I don't condemn them. I really want them to see the joy in the feasts, really. It's not even about them doing Christmas. If you're doing it because you think, like you said, it's the feel good and all that stuff, but if you truly are like, well, I do this for Messiah, right? Well, then why wouldn't we do all the other feast days? Because there's so many feast days are for Messiah. So why wouldn't we even look at those in the same light?
Why are you only celebrating why are you not celebrating any of the holy days in the Bible? You're only celebrating the holidays you've been passed down through tradition. Is one question I would have for people celebrating Christmas.
There's a psychology, I think, to it of the infant Christ, because the infant Christ is the helpless, not the judge for sure. It's just the representation of of focusing and worshiping the infant Christ has very profound, deep implications to the way we think about him. And I'm not saying that it's a bad thing to rejoice that he came, that he was born, that he was prophesied to be here. Like literally, there's passages in the scripture that break down the whole amazing miracle of his birth and the signs and all of that. So that's not minimizing any of that, but I do think it's tied to the psychology because he's a lot less scary as a baby. So that's why people show up to church on Christmas, because they're like, oh, maybe baby Jesus will have mercy on me this year.
Ricky Bobby. Is that his name, Ricky Bobby?
Yeah.
And I'm not saying everything that happens around Christmas is all bad. Obviously, there have been people who get blessings. They might have been looking for those blessings, but something happened that was good for them. And our culture is emotionally tied to these holidays. There's a lot of people who have a hard time during these days because they lost a family member or something. And it just shows you the significance that we put on these days versus Passover or things like that. I will, I'll say it time and time again, there are so many people in the Torah observant movement that are very, very hostile. And we've shared this before, but I'm going to... So this meme may seem like a lot of people are like, oh yeah, that's the truth, right? But is it? Because to me, when I see this meme, I see somebody who's prideful. Look at everyone else doing their Christmas tree, and look at me. I'm doing all the feast days of the Father, right? And why are you even dragging that with a chain anyway? You know what I mean? Like what? How do it's almost like are his feast days burdensome? So really, you're just saying it's almost like trading one addiction for the next. Why are you even celebrating his feast days? I mean, we should, in my opinion, but
not to virtue signal to the world that we do them.
Right. So I look at a lot of the things and they come out, and because social media is mostly negative, most people go on there. We were just talking about this earlier. People go on there just to cause strife. And that is true of the Torah observant community too, because I just see bashing and bashing and bashing. And I'm like, have you saved one person? Like, you know what I mean? Have you changed anyone's mind? I'm not the person like, oh, that person celebrated Christmas yesterday, so I can't have coffee with them. I can't discuss other things, Like if that person calls me, it's like, hey, I really need your help because I'm struggling with my marriage. You think I'd be like, well, maybe if you just stop celebrating Christmas, your marriage will be fine. No, I'm not going to, so there are people who they become reclusive in this movement and then they put themselves on a pedestal. And I don't know if they all are even aware that they're doing it, but it just causes polar opposites, just strife between one side and the other. There is no, and I think a lot of people, like you said, become soft on Christmas, but I've always been soft on the people, not on Christmas. I just soft on the people. Like, I'm not going to bash you and hate on you because you're doing something. I'm just going to point out I don't do it. I think you should look into this more, and we should all do that. Like, no person who says that they believe in Scripture should negate anything that we're saying, or even people who, we should all look into it and do our due diligence and study Scripture out and seek Him and ask Him, what do you want me to do? Yeah, versus what do I want to do and what does culture want me to do?
Yeah, it's the difference of voicing between somebody who knows, and they know, and somebody who doesn't know, and is just, they've never looked into it, and they are stuck in all of those warm feel-goods. And so it's how we voice to the people that we know better, and the people that don't know, we can have a much different approach, very, very patient, and I think that's kind of why you see people with such vitriol and the strong wordedness online, is because they're not talking to the people who don't know. They're talking to the people they are disappointed in, and they're frustrated, and they're like, how could you go back to observing something that is so blatantly false? So.
Remember this one, Johnny?
Honestly, I get that one though, because if you work somewhere that plays Christmas music this whole season,
I know people who hate that even that celebrate Christmas. They're like,
oh yeah.
Yeah, I feel that one too, to be honest. So one of the things that's actually softened my heart a little bit on the topic is just explaining it to my 6-year-old son. Because he's seeing all this stuff, and we don't shelter him because he's going to have to navigate through this world, and he's going to have to understand that not all Christians operate with the same playbook. Okay.
Yeah.
And he'll ask me, well, Dad, why don't we do these things? And I said, well, it's just not in the Bible, son. Like we have a very simple faith now. If it's in the Bible and it says to do it, we do it to the best of our ability. If it's not in there or it says not to do it, we avoid those things. And but I've also caught the same spirit that's in some of the Torah community and in the Christian community, to be fair, in my son and probably in my wife and myself too, is probably where he got it. But he'll see somebody and he's kind of cautious with strangers anyways. We've raised him to be that way. And he'll be like, he probably keeps Christmas. And I'm like, son, you
that guy keeps Christmas.
I was like, son, that doesn't inherently make somebody better or worse than anybody else. There are people that keep Christmas that have more gentleness and humility and patience and love for people than some of the people who understand Torah front and back. Okay, and that's kind of the stuff that Yeshua was coming to rebuke in the Pharisees, right? Is that they were keeping the letter of the law, but their heart was not in the right place. They weren't doing the right things for the right reasons. Yeah. So we've tried to explain to them, like, hey, people don't know any better. And they've actually been a victim of the society and of the world that's been lied to for millennium, forever. And so we try to have compassion and understanding, knowing that just like we were lied to and we believed these lies, and we partook and engaged in the same culture before we knew any better. But once you know better, you have to be accountable to what you know.
Mean when someone walks by and you're like, "Hey, Merry Christmas," you're like, "Get away from me, you heathen!"
I have a little bit of a hard time with it because I won't say Merry Christmas.
I usually just say thank you. because I know that they mean it in a friendly way.
Yeah. It's not time.
I don't like to say it back, but it's not because I'm against you. It's because I just like, hey, come celebrate Sukkot with us, right? For real, come camp out. It's like one of the times where the father's like, hey, all that money you were going to give the temple, go out and buy some wine with it. Like, it's literally an 8-day party.
I don't get why you trade 8 days of Sukkot for 1 day of Christmas. Come on.
Well, yeah. So
it's way better.
Like I said, it's Christmas just in general. When I take everything away from it, right, and we just break it down, it's still just for all the people who are celebrating, his birthday. Do you really celebrate his birthday? And I'm not accusing you. I'm just asking, do you really celebrate his birthday? Because everything else seems like a distraction. It's like, oh, what? Now, I will say this on the opposite note, for all the people in the Torah community that are like gung-ho about calendars, and they're like, oh, you did Passover on the wrong day, or you did Sukkot on the wrong day. Christians, when you go, or say all Christians, but just generally people who do Christmas, if I'm like, hey, you going to go to the Christmas party on this day? They don't go, if it's not on December 25th, you're not doing it, you heathen. So but we kind of did, not we, but there's a lot of people in the Torah community that do that with the calendar. Right? And it's,
at that point, the calendar is your idol.
Yeah.
Right. I met plenty of those people.
So anything can become an idol. And so, so for the people who celebrate Christmas, we are not condemning you. And in fact, I don't like it when people bash you guys or come at it in a very, very harsh way, because they're not changing anybody's minds at all. Like, they're not even in, like, hey, I know you did Christmas, but you want to check out Scripture and do Passover with, you want to like see these other things? At least check it out. Don't just nope, and just dismiss everything. Have an open mind, even if like you're first, you're hesitant, because I think we're all hesitant to a lot of things, not just this topic, but generally, because we all have pride, and I've been doing it this way forever, so I'm just going to dismiss what somebody's telling me.
Right, it's not bad to be zealous, but like doing things in love is extremely important.
Yeah.
So what is the kind of the balance between holidays that we know are false, we know are associated with deities that are opposing our Father in heaven? All the negative associated with Christmas is very obvious. But I mean, what about other holidays and celebrations? Because we've talked about, being biblical, focused in our observance of things. I mean, what about like 4th of July? I mean, that's often the argument that comes against, Christmas, being so explicitly biblical based that you can't do anything that's not in the scriptures, because that somehow you've turned into a sin. And so where's the sliding scale? Where has it become wrong? And what are you guys willing to participate in terms of additional non-biblical stated celebrations, observances, and, of that stuff?
That's a good question. I always, like I said, when Paul speaks about, you're seeking out your own salvation with fear and trembling, I don't necessarily view every holiday as the same. I don't. I don't look at 4th of July as the same thing as Christmas. I will say, if you don't celebrate and you abstain from it because of your own conviction or whatever, that's fine. But that person should also be gentle and kind and not, bash other people for doing it or not doing it. And I think vice versa. I think there should be kindness. I don't go out of my way to celebrate 4th of July or anything like that. But family do get together, and it's just an excuse. Thanksgiving isn't around the same. I've never looked at it as the day that was for God in general anyway. So I think my understanding is like, if it's not about God at all, I don't even look at it in that term. So are you going to, you celebrated National Donut Day and you made donuts today. Like, you're a heathen. There are people who are on one extreme and then the other. And, I don't know. I can't speak for everyone and say what you should do. But there are gray areas that we should also, like I said, be kind and gentle, because not everybody in the Torah is the same. Not every Christian they're not all the same.
So people, I mean, if you know something about, it's like, so the same thing can be said for Hanukkah, right? So it's not explicitly stated in Scripture to celebrate Hanukkah. Is it sinful to celebrate it? I don't think so. We don't make a big deal out of Hanukkah in our family. It is the first thing that we celebrated when we quit doing the secular holidays, because it just happened to be that around that time of the year, and we were like, cool. Seems like Yeshua went to the Feast of Dedication. Sounds like that's also the Festival of Lights. He was there, so he didn't condemn it. But you know, it doesn't even matter one way or the other. The thing is people don't care what you know until they know that you care. And so you can have the truth and just present it in a way that is so unpalatable because it's not good fruit, and fruit is naturally unpalatable. You get one taste and you spit it out.
Attracting versus distracting.
Yeah. So I mean, you want to share your opinion, do it in good taste, and
read the room.
Yeah. Well. Yeah. So.
Hanukkah is one of those where I've heard different. You know, I've been looking at it, and here the reason I've been looking at it is because I can find where Yeshua at least was there, didn't condemn it. I know is Maccabees, right? The whole story. Now I don't know. You know, I've been wanting to interview people that do Hanukkah that are in this walk to ask some questions, because I'm ignorant to it. You know, I want to know more about it. Some of it seems like there are crossover with traditions of Christmas because they've tried to make it more palatable. And I don't know, you know, and I'm not, like I said, I'm not even against gift giving and just in general. Like, it could be a random Tuesday on July 17th. And like, I saw, you know, a knife that Johnny liked, and, you know, I was like, oh, I thought about him. Here's a gift, you know, like those types of gifts are awesome. And they're just truly genuine, a friend giving another friend a gift. I don't think gifts should have to be a corporate thing or because of a certain thing. But like I said, I'm not against, because I don't understand everything about Hanukkah. So, you know, I know some people, they do the 8-day thing and all that, and I'm not against them. I don't, you know, I'd like to talk to them more about it. And clearly something did happen. There was an 8-day feast that was created. We just don't know all of the traditions and where those specific that they do now came from. And
I will say, like, the whole thing about the candles burning for 8 days, that's not even really in the book of Maccabees. I think that's from what I have been
and
told.
That's where I would want to ask what
From what I've been told, it's like in Orthodox rabbinical Judaism, they have this thing where you can't celebrate military victories. I don't know. But then they kind of find a way around it, as they always do. Like, oh, this thing happened, so we'll celebrate that. So, and then there's, I think there are some additions to Hanukkah, but I'm kind of like you. I don't have any, I don't have a problem with Hanukkah. I think they're like the 9-branch menorah. Well, when it talks about the menorah in the scriptures, it talks about 7 branches.
Yeah, that's where
it's kind of like additions.
That's where I want to ask, and it's not to condemn anybody who's doing it. I just want to know. Adam has actually talked more about making more of an emphasis next year with Hanukkah, not necessarily in all the, but
my wife and I read through parts of First Maccabees on about that. I
would love to get together 8 days and have dinner with certain different families in the walk, and you know, that'd be kind of cool. But like I said, you know, it's do your due diligence and look at this stuff. Like, research it out. What is your own intent in your heart?
Yeah, I would say with Hanukkah, there is that caveat that it's not a Leviticus 23 feast, but we do see, you know, the celebration of it and the victory of the Maccabees has profound prophetic implications, direct parallels with the forthcoming Antichrist and the abomination of desolation. Like, all of these things are dealt with in the season of Hanukkah. And I think it's really interesting that's in juxtaposition with Christmas around the same time frame, because Hanukkah is this time of remembering the people that stood up in the face of the Greekization of their culture and being compelled actually to celebrate the solstice and the sacrifices that went around the celebration of Zeus, and we know Zeus was, you know, associated with even December 25th way back then, and so it's really interesting the kind of intellectual process. And I think the thing that sets Hanukkah apart from your other kind of just lesser holidays like July 4th or Thanksgiving is the fact that it is specifically calling out to remembrance the God of the Bible, assisting these Maccabees in overcoming idolatry in a variety of ways. It's based in truth. It's based in, prophetic parallels and things we can learn from. And the comparison with celebrating something like that, which we don't put too much effort into it because we don't want it to draw away from the real biblical feast. But the difference between that and things like Thanksgiving and July 4th is the modern holidays that our Babylonian system presents to us have a veneer of spirituality to them, which I think is why people like doing those times. Because you think of July 4th, what is the spirit that is evoked for that holiday? The spirit is the spirit of patriotism. It's the love and dedication to country. So that's what that evocation causes. And then Thanksgiving. It's to me, I'm really starting to inspect Thanksgiving more and more because I'm realizing it is one of the direct competitors to the Feast of Sukkot. Thanksgiving either was originally Sukkot that has then been kind of modernized and crammed into a Turkey Day, because we do know the early pilgrims, the Puritans, were very Hebrew-minded. They even, possibly were going to make Hebrew one of the first languages as they immigrated from Europe, escaping that persecution in their faith and coming here. They were likely keeping these celebrations like Passover and Sukkot. And so, yes, we know that Thanksgiving could have been associated with Sukkot back in the early days, but today it is a direct competitor to Sukkot, which is the festival of Thanksgiving that we're commanded to come and rejoice and be thankful. And so I've realized that these minor holidays that are propped up by our system to cover, the 4 quarters of the year, fall, spring, winter, summer, these are still direct competitors and replacements of biblical-based things. And so we can compare that direct replacement aspect with Hanukkah, which is not directly replacing any biblical feast. It's rather encouraging a stalwartness towards biblical principles and breaking down the idolatry in our lives and rejecting the pork that's offered to you at pain of death, because I think it's just to compare those two, because I know that's one of the arguments is, oh, if you guys are talking so bad about Christmas and you do Hanukkah, you're just adding to the commandments yourselves. And so I wanted to break down that comparison between minor holidays like July the 4th and Thanksgiving and Hanukkah as these additional things that are not so bad to do. But as we grow and mature in our faith, we realize that I'm for one, if you guys hear passion in my voice, I'm talking in passion for my family, for my daughters, what I want them to cherish. And so people can get offended easily because they celebrate those things and it's not directed towards you. It's directed towards the cultural changes that need to happen collectively for us to leave Babylon. Because
I've been kind of wanting to do Hanukkah for that reason, at least aspects of it, for family, to kind of have some, because during Christmas, everybody's and it's not to, that like your son, you were talking about how he's like, hey, he sees things and you can't just keep him in a bubble. They're going to obviously run into these things. So, yeah, go ahead.
You know what he told me yesterday? He said, Dad, I want to become president of the United States so that we can, and he said, and we won't do Christmas anymore. He said, and then this will be a Christian nation. And I was like, I love your heart, son. I love your heart. And I said, if you wanted to be president of the United States, you could do that. Y'all's will be done above ours. But hey, I have stayed out of politics, and I don't know if we're segueing. I didn't mean to do that. But
no,
hey,
you're fine.
But I think that so my whole life I have stayed completely out of politics because, for one, I have very, very little confidence in the system that operates our country and our world, really. And two, I just believed that my vote didn't matter and it was all a rigged game anyways. But as I have children now, and as I'm seeing, the enemy become more blatant in his show of force, if you will, in our country towards our children and towards just the culture, I felt an obligation to try to stand against it in any way that I can, whether it makes a difference or not. I want to try. And so, and that's just kind of going off of, like, my son says something about becoming the president of the United States. 2 years ago, I would have said, no, you don't. You do not want to do that. But I don't want to discourage him from trying to make a difference. And that's where his heart was at. It's like he wanted to make a difference in this country.
I forgot what it's in Jeremiah, where it says, seek the peace in the nation where said you've been exiled, for in its peace you will have peace. So that tells me we should try to be influencing our culture, especially because politics are downstream from culture. Let's be honest. So I have no issue with people, there's going to be people who are like, oh, your vote doesn't matter. And that's fine if you want to believe that. But now don't condemn people who don't believe exactly as you believe. And just because they vote or because they're talking about an issue that you will deem political, even though I think there's many moral topics that have been titled political, because to me that's another way that Hasatan has created a psyop to get you to not even navigate it, because they're like, no, that's political. So it, I think a lot of people are like, oh, politics, and everything's made to be that way. So we just fight, separate, polar opposites. There's never any unity. We don't sit down and even when we come to different resolutions or different understandings, at least we can go, okay, I'm not your enemy and I'm not trying to hate you and oppress you and vice versa. But I think that's human nature, pride, obviously. And this is why even in the Torah community, there are people, if I go visit my family during Thanksgiving, I don't believe I'm doing anything wrong. Somebody else may think otherwise. And that's fine. But to have a condemning mindset and to be like, oh, well, you're not on my level. We do ours on Shabbat anyway when we, so it was funny. They were like, oh, happy thing. I'm like, oh, Shabbat Shalom. So, and like I said, I'm not, the people who will use that argument, and I will say this, anybody who uses the argument that, well, you do this though, even though you say you're against this, but you go ahead and do this. To me, that is somebody who isn't even listening to what you've said to begin with. They're just looking for hypocrisy so that they can justify their own stance. Mm-hmm.
It's much like the Pharisees did to Yeshua. They're just sin searching. They're like, aha, you healed on Shabbat.
Right.
Like,
none of this is I'm perfect. We want to walk the road of perfection, in the sense of like we want to be as like Messiah as we can. Mm-hmm. But obviously that comes in being humble and gracious and merciful too. There's a reason why Abraham tried to convince the Father or convince God in general not to destroy Sodom and Gomorrah, and they were way worse when you live. Those places must have been horrid. And for Abraham to try to be like, hey, well, if you only find this many, please spare the rest of the people.
It's a stark contrast to today, because you get people who are like, oh, and I'm guilty of saying this too, and I'm trying to walk away from saying it, but they're like, well, California just needs to fall off into the ocean. It's like you're talking about millions, tens of millions of people. Yeah, it's kind of for the most part a pretty awful place where some awful things are happening, but you got a lot of good, believers there. Like the Father's people are there in some capacity.
Yeah,
you're gonna wish,
and even people who we would. Yeah. There's people that they're not. They're still celebrating Christmas, or they're doing this. You don't know who's going to be who in the end. At the very, very end, you could be like, "Well, I did all these things." It's the same thing. Many people will come in my name and they will say, "I've done all these things in your name," and he will say, "I never knew you." Right? Workers of iniquity. Right? Lawlessness isn't just not doing the Sabbath or doing the feast days. Right? Lawlessness can also mean being a jerk to people. So he could be like, I never knew you. And he could be talking to somebody that's in Torah that thinks they did everything right.
And if you... Oh, sorry. No, you got it. If you look at all the reasons why he tells them to depart, it's because of not, loving people. Mm-hmm. It's like That was
one of the biggest factors in Israel in general. Is like divided on everything.
That's general order number 1 is to love people as you love yourself. To treat them like you want to be treated,
Yeah. So we're kind of branching into politics, but before we do that, I kind of wanted to share this video.
Fill up jars with coins. Well, don't take them over to the coin star. Just do like this here. You open this guy up, open that up. Look, I'm already at over $25. And they're not going to take almost 12%. Paid for all my stuff with change, and I got $17 cash back.
Oh, I'm so glad you played Jerry's video of coins, because I wanted everybody to know I have a new song coming out very soon. Shameless plug. And in the song, it includes the phrase nickeled and dimed. So it relates, to what we're doing. That's super awesome, man. How many people have seen that video so far?
So it's right around 4.6 million last time I checked.
Goodness.
Yeah.
Wow. A lot of people needed that information, I guess.
Yeah, I guess so. It has opened up a few opportunities too to witness to people in the comments. Most of the comments were, it's a pretty mixed bag. Most people are. It's hard to say. I don't want to be negative, but people are ugly online sometimes. I'll just say that.
Don't say.
Yeah.
As much as we try to be positive on social media, there are people who just come and they try to just, it's whatever the subject is, people just attack people. Keyboard warriors. Speaking of that, though, so if you ever go to a Walmart checkout and you see Jerry there, just avoid it.
Jerry, you've never looked so good.
Yeah, I clean up nice.
Yeah.
All right, so before we move on, I'm going to show...
Only Messiah is going to save us, but I'm hoping Donald Trump can help me afford groceries and gas again.
I wish you wouldn't pull people into this.
I'm voting for McDonald Trump.
I know, but it's just like nobody's business. Who cares? It's like who you're sleeping with. Like, who cares? Nobody else needs to know about that. There's a witch doctor.
We voted for McDonald Trump.
Stop. Stop. I thought you were gonna
Where's
take
your
a
I voted
picture.
sticker?
I gave it to my child. I thought you were gonna take a picture of us together.
I'll get a screen grab later.
I just want to say something. We're going to make groceries affordable again.
So...
You can stop eating the dogs.
They're eating the dogs and eating the cats. Now they can buy the eggs. Very affordable.
We're going to build a wall like China.
I like the British accent. What's that British accent?
I don't even know.
We're going to build a wall.
I used to be able to do it, but I don't know. My accents aren't that great. So anyways, I showed that video because there's a lot of people in general that don't, or say, stay out of politics. Don't get involved in corrupt system, and they'll use any excuse, it's a sin for you to even vote, which I think that's absurd. So I wanted to bring that up because we're going to obviously segue into politics. And the question, should we be in politics? Is there a boundary? And what are those boundaries? And how should we navigate the system?
So I think that, like I mentioned in that clip, we're not to put our faith in the system of this world. We know that Hasatan is the prince of the air, and I believe that the governments, especially up to this point, are by and large ruled by his authority. But I do think, especially on the local level, we should be doing what we can to oppose that. I don't think that we should be watching how hard the enemy is at work and set back with our arms crossed and just do nothing. I find that to be more egregious than voting to try to make a change. So that's just me.
I pretty much agree with what Jerry's saying. I was kind of on the other side too. I didn't vote at all this, not even locally, this last election, and now I'm regretting that because Amendment 3 here in Missouri passed, which if anybody doesn't know about that, basically Missouri is now a pro-abortion state. I'm not saying my one vote could have changed that, but I would have been at least making my voice heard in what I feel about this issue, which it's a moral issue.
I will say the amendment. So what I don't like about it, obviously, is it brings so this state was no abortion, right? Mm-hmm. And it didn't. The amendment itself isn't to make it a pro-abortion. It was for people to, like, if your wife was going to die giving birth or something like that, there was no, from at least the discussion, there was no wording in the law that would allow them to abort if they needed to. Obviously, it's not an abortion anyway. To you, you're saving the life of the mother. The only thing is, I don't know if they actually put a stipulation in that to where it's worded specifically, because you can just say something that's general and then start fitting, just use that as a whatever, just to skate it. Anything can skate by. I don't know. And I don't know everything about Amendment 3. I do know that it did get passed. All we can do is really hope that is not abused.
Sure. Well, we can't count on that. I do think that it was just kind of a backdoor entrance to getting it back on the table. We statistically, life of the mother and incest, which is what they're kind of
it's very
marketing in this topic, is less than 1% of all abortions. Most of them, a vast majority, are done for convenience sake. So I actually didn't vote on it either, because this was my very first time voting ever. And I just wasn't read up on this. I'm not used to being engaged in the political sphere whatsoever. And I'm still not very engaged, but I try to keep enough. I like to know what's going on around me. It does affect me and my family. So, not the abortion specifically, but yeah.
So I think this is really telling, and I think it's a microcosm of the whole topic of politics in general, is that there's a false presentation of the duality of choice, that if you don't choose the lesser of two evils, then you are condoning the greater. And I think that's exactly how politics has been set up. It's kind of like the leprechaun who offers a contract. You don't reap the benefits and you don't reap the curse until you sign your name on the dotted line. And I think that's where people look at a lot of these things. Like, there could even be very good laws being passed and things that we should vote on that seem like, I can agree with that. But as soon as we put our stamp of approval on it, we become culpable for whatever goes forward that might have been hidden in those documents or those laws. And I think that's kind of what people look at politics who don't want to engage. They see that. They see that when we put our stamp of approval on red or blue, then are we responsible for the things that they do that we disagree with, because we've given them our seal of approval because of the things we like about them? And I think that's the thing that really gets people tripped up about this topic, is we don't want to be culpable for those who are put into a position of power above us. And I think that's why the biblical precedence is you put those who are of your brothers, in charge. Like it's always within the camp. It's always within the nation of Israel that you select your leaders. And so, living in Babylon, living in the system of the world, the rulers that are presented to us are always a mixed bag. It's always a good mixed with the bad. And that's even presented on the left and right. Like, it's always, these people are very kind and loving and they want, pro-humanity, kind of assisted, I'm losing my words, but
welfare.
Well, okay, so welfare culture on one side, and then on the other side, it's a much more conservative values and so
more capitalist.
Yeah, I think that's what really is tripping people up about this topic, is how can we come away voting knowing that we're voting for the good and bad that come after. And so for you guys, what does that look like to you? I mean, are we responsible for the things that we disagree with that go forward for those we vote for?
Not necessarily, and the reason I say that is because even in Israel, leaders did things that were wrong.
True.
And it's not necessarily it was my responsibility that leader decided to do something wrong. I look at it this exact same way. So where does the line get drawn, right? Let's test it. Let's test it to the extremes, right? So I can take that exact same argument and say, well, you don't eat pork, right? But if you go to Mama Jean's and you buy beef, right, you're still paying money to a store that sells pork. So are you partaking in the selling of pork? I would say no. But the point is I can use that argument. So to me, I don't think that someone who votes is necessarily voting for something specific. Now, I agree that they hide things within certain bills. They try to do that a lot. And I don't know. I don't know the answer for every individual that.
So at least in my purview, I separate my faith and the country we live in. This country is not our head. It's not going to guide us on the path of righteousness, the narrow path, none of that. So when I'm getting instruction for how I live my life, I'm going to be following Messiah and the Word, and that's it. I'm not going to follow you guys. We don't follow each other even. Right. We set our standard based off of Scripture. And so when I vote for McDonald Trump, I'm not setting him up as an idol for me. He is not the person I look to for moral character, or he's in charge of this business, and this government is a business, and he's a businessman. And so that's why I voted for him, because he runs a better economical situation for our country.
Taking advantage.
And so I'm basically voting for a CEO of a company. I'm putting my vote in for that. That's where I stand on it. And is he going to make mistakes? Yes. So will we in our life. And he's not, there's nothing about it to me that gives him a moral position of authority at all. But I do know that's, and the reason I say that is because it's equated to idolatry, that I'm putting my faith in man.
Well, and even if you don't vote, if you have a driver's license, right, there are people in the Torah Observant community, and like I said, that's why I say not everybody in Torah Observant are the same people, but there are people who will say, having a driver's license or a fishing license, anything, somehow that you're in joining with the enemy, and that's just, to me, I'm sorry, but it's absurd. Why did we build fences on our rooftops back in the day? Why was that even a command?
So that people didn't hurt themselves. They didn't fall off.
Right. But no one hangs out on roofs for the most part. They do balconies, but so if you don't hang out on your roof, do you need to build a fence on top of your roof? No. But you do cover your light sockets, right? Your electrical outlets with plugs, right? Because you don't want a child sticking something in there and shocking themselves. You wear seat belts and you have child car seats for the purpose of safety, right? So that command transcends into context. You get what I'm saying? And so I don't know if you get what you follow what I'm trying to get at.
Yeah, I heard this saying once that government is for those who have rejected the laws of the Most High. And so the systems of man's government is to keep all of us rowdy animals from eating each other alive in a system that's separate from faith and conviction based on biblical principles. And so the more government is necessary for a more lawless, loveless society, because they have nothing holding them back from devouring each other. So man's laws are then put into place to keep those things in check so society can function. But whenever you have a people or a group of people that are living according to the commandments, are loving their neighbor, the need for governance for those people is very small, very little involvement in their day-to-day life or even at all. And government becomes just like a way to collectively pool our resources to achieve greater feats for the benefit of our society. So roads, building libraries, infrastructure type things. And so that's really where we see the benefit and value of government. And unfortunately, evil people are doing their darndest to get into those positions of power in those things that affect us all. And so the involvement, absolutely, I think involvement locally definitely is very impactful. Your city and state government, I think, can directly influence you and your life as a person. I think once we get to the national level, things get a little bit more like a conservative president is not necessarily going to affect you as much in a liberal state. Like if you're living in California, you're still going to be experiencing, and so in a way, it's kind of like based
Wildfire.
on, yeah. It's almost as if we have to choose to then live amongst the people that share the values with us. And then when we do that, and we have a community that's growing and has strong beliefs, that community can then engage in the local politics and engage in the culture of our area and actually make lasting change. But I do think if you're
everything is downstream from culture.
Yeah.
And like you brought up California, the reason, or like it may not affect there, but locally, this is where I would, unfortunate that people get into power, like you said, and they have evil agendas. And unfortunately, California is a place where they took the budget away from firefighting and all that stuff. I think it was $20 million that they cut from that budget. And you can't, so if I had to say, and I was able to influence change, that's why I would try, because I want to prevent people's, even if they're Hollywood, I still don't, not like rejoicing. And some people are like, yeah, Hollywood's getting what they deserve, I don't. Why
surely
do we have that?
They're unrighteous,
right? So the point is, that's bad. I wouldn't want anybody to go through that. So you do want systems in place to prevent things, and unfortunately, in certain places, the culture puts an emphasis on other things that are maybe not as important. And unfortunately for them, they don't live in a strong refuge. They don't live in an area that has their best interests at heart.
And one biblical thing I can say about getting involved in politics is and just being part of the culture. You see Joseph was literally the number 2 guy in actual Egypt. You see Daniel was the number 2 guy in literal Babylon.
Right.
So this whole America's Babylon. Well, of course it is. But that doesn't mean you shouldn't try to reach people.
Right.
Even get involved in politics if necessary.
And as long as you don't, Daniel still followed God, and when he couldn't, he chose God.
Up to the point where they said, bow down to this or die,
right,
or
exactly.
don't pray
and
or die.
So, and the reason I brought up the whole safety thing is because there are people that will argue that, like I said, about the driver's license and even getting car insurance, right? But if you're driving without car insurance, even though I don't like the system of car insurance, right? But you're driving without it and you make a mistake and you're in this walk and you wreck into somebody and you injure somebody for life, Yah forbid you kill somebody, you don't have insurance. And so you can't even afford what it's going to cost to correct your damages. So I would argue that you're not building a fence around your house. You're not you're not being as proactively safe as you should be. Now, I'm not saying that car insurance is the greatest. Obviously, I think insurance companies can be corrupt. But unfortunately, it is a law, and I do understand why the need for that law is because people would take advantage of other people. They'd be like, "Oh, I wrecked into you, but now I ruined your car. You can't get to work to afford groceries for your family, but that's not on me
because America's Babylon."
Yeah, not obeying the laws of the land is a very slippery slope, and I've seen it in this walk where people feel that they're not required to follow basic rules and laws in the state or in the nation because we have a rule book. We have a book of instructions, and that's what Yah gave us. And to that we will follow and nothing else. Actually, I think that there's scriptures, I couldn't point you to it, but talking about following your local authorities, not to the point of breaking Yah's commandments, but, falling within the bounds of your hierarchy, the structure that you're under. Anybody have the scripture for that? You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah, I know. So one of the writings Paul had, can't place the reference.
Anyway, sorry.
It was written.
Is it not written?
Is it not written? Since we've covered this topic of the push and pull of involvement, maybe we could now address the current administration, Donald Trump, and some of the things he's
being
doing.
the Antichrist. I'm just kidding.
No.
I'm just joking because that's you hear that. But I heard that about Obama. I heard that about Bush. I heard that about almost every political
I can
leader.
run for president now. I'm 35, so I just want to hear all of the theories of why I'm the Antichrist. I just want to hear it. Like, I don't even want to.
You should run. I'll support you.
Yeah, I mean, so here's my thought process going into it is I actually attended the inauguration in Washington, D.C. And I witnessed it and the whole atmosphere. I saw all the Trump fans, and it was really a cool moment of history for me to get to be a part of, because you always see the Trump festival, the Trump rallies, and he's, for years and years, it's always him promising what he's going to accomplish, what he's going to do. And going on the inauguration where he comes back after being sworn in and he has his victory lap rally. And I had never been to any kind of Trump event or rally or anything, but this was the moment that he sits down, and the whole time he's been promising people he's going to do this, I'm going to do this. This was the rally. He sat down and signed the executive orders right on the desk, and he was like, I'm going to go to work right in front of y'all. How do you feel about that? And so I wanted to bring up some of the things he actually signed his first day of office. Very interesting things. One being the declaration and return for the national perspective of gender to being only two. Mm-hmm. I mean, that's a little win in the cultural battle of where we've been going since the abomination started back in 2008. It's really interesting to see that he's taken a step. He's taken this step to return us to a more realistic. I mean, I loved when he made the announcement in his inaugural speech. He's like, "And I'm going to sign an executive order, 2 genders," and then the camera flips to the audience, and it's just like a bunch of men and women going, "Yeah, there's that makes sense, okay," but it's really interesting to just see him do. What did you think of some of the other things that he's been doing in his first days in office?
Personally, I think that he's been pretty good about doing the things he says he's going to do, and that to me says a lot. Being a man of your word is, that's something. That's something. I can't speak, on I don't know if he's concealing something. If he's trying to win the affection of the people, he's doing a good job about it. I think that people that don't want to like Trump because he's a character. He's entertaining. I personally do like Trump. I think that
he is a likable character to a degree. I understand the reason why people are like, "Oh, he's arrogant." He's just not very intelligent in the. So there's a lot of other politicians are very good about appearing humble. They're articulate. He's not very articulate. He just speaks his mind, and I think that's refreshing for some people.
Yeah,
because they see honesty, even if it comes off arrogantly. First and foremost, he is not a savior. No, and I know people have made him an idol. This is why even if I support a political point of something that he puts into policy, are we guilty if he does something wrong? But I think it's the same thing when if I tithe to my fellowship and then the leaders of that fellowship do something I disagree with, am I responsible for the thing that they did that could have been wrong? But ultimately I think people they've latched onto his character. He's very charismatic.
Polarizing.
Yeah. People got to be very, very careful, obviously. to put their faith and trust in any government, let alone Donald Trump. But he has a likable character. Even the previous time he was in term, right? He was one of the only people that actually came in and did some of the things that he said that he would do. But usually that doesn't happen on any. Right. And you usually have to go through. There's always the excuse, well, we didn't have the support in the House of Representatives and we didn't have the Senate. But, for all his constituents, the people that voted for him or whatever, I mean, he has put his
money where his mouth is.
Yeah, he has done.
I'm rooting for him. Like I referred to him as kind of like the CEO of this of the company that is the United States. Why wouldn't we want that to be successful?
I want the peace in this country because it benefits me ultimately.
Yeah.
So even
and hopefully our children, our grandchildren. I would love it if we had some time bought. We know prophetically where we're heading, but if we have time to win people over to Messiah before everything really starts to unfold that we see in Scripture, I think that we should be wanting that. And so I also, on the other side, I see and I have the same sentiment of like, any day now, come and we're happy to be with you in your kingdom. But I also have I feel like I can almost understand how Noah may have felt, knowing that the floods were coming and that so many people were going to be lost.
No one listened to him.
Nobody was listening, but he went out there though, and he was still preaching.
He still tried.
Them. Yeah, and I think that we should. And I think that we should. Is it a lost cause? Maybe.
Yeah.
Will we get one in the boat? Maybe. So
we should definitely be that's why. So we should definitely be cautious about how we respond to whoever the leader is, because we can make the argument about that, and whether some people are like, "Oh, he's a false this," and then the argument doesn't lead anywhere. No one's really changing their mind. It causes a lot of strife. And I'm not saying that you shouldn't. I'm critical of Donald Trump just like I am of any person. I'm going to observe from a distance and be like, all right, I like this policy. I don't like what you're doing. And we as honest people should call out the bad. Mm-hmm. And I think,
lazy people are a lot like water. They seek the path of least resistance. And in the same way, hypocrites that want to see positive change in the world oftentimes seek savior figures. And so that's one aspect of this I did want to bring up is, there is the talk and the people theorizing, okay, could this be a prophetic? I mean, every president's called the Antichrist, but whenever we look at Donald Trump and the amount that the conservative party of America has propped him up as a savior, I wanted to ask you guys what your thoughts on some of the like messianic parallels that they've been making with Trump, because people do make idols out of anything. Yeah, and they have literally made associations with Trump and Christ like throughout his persecution for the indictments and the being under trial, under investigation for Congress. It was happening right around the time of Passover, and we have now, he really, to me, he looks like a gentleman that is trying to leave a legacy. He's probably the best hope for your son to become president because he's the first non-career politician to get into office. But people do make idols out of anything. They can make an idol out of a donut. And I think that's what people have to recognize when it comes to these political figures is that...
Who are you putting your hope in?
Who are you putting your hope in? And are you just using him because you're lazy and you don't want to enact change in your own life? You're choosing somebody who can do it for you at a distance politically.
I think there's a polar opposite of that too, being when you're so, because fear can lead to like anger and hatred, right? Yeah. So if you're just like, oh, he's an antichrist, or you're always about end time prophecy, and that's what you're focused on.
That's one thing
that still can be a negative.
That's one thing that's been getting on my nerves for quite a while. It seems, I remember like when 9/11 happened, how old was I, like 10 or 11? I think I was 11 years old when that happened, almost 12. Then there was what I call the End Times fan club came about. now everything is just about end times prophecies. And I don't know who needs to hear this, but reposting memes on Facebook does not make you a prophet.
Yeah.
You know, I think that like the Father uses all humans to fulfill his own prophecy because he can see what's going to happen based on everyone's heart anyway. He knows he's omnipotent, right? He knows what's going to happen. So I think that could Trump turn around and be negative all of a sudden? Yeah. Could he change something for the better for the current time? Yeah. I think both are possibilities. And I think that like when the Father uses people, even people who are not necessarily morally, because I wouldn't say he's I don't look at Donald Trump for like, scriptural leadership or anything like that. I think people can make him the Messiah, all that stuff. But ultimately, I think what's going to happen is going to happen, and we shouldn't be fearful at all anyways. At least we should. That's where our faith comes in Messiah, right? And just keep our focus on God. And ultimately, it could be good for right now, and then could he be a segue into something because people trust in this and something bad happens later? Yeah, obviously. Celebrities do it, right? You're like, oh, I like the celebrity, I follow him. Then all of a sudden, he does something that you normally wouldn't have done before, and then you're like, well, I saw... You
mentioned Jesus in his speech.
Or he did this, or not just anything. You can be influenced by anybody you have put on a pedestal.
Right.
Yeah.
And so we really, like I said, we got to be very cautious. And this is not to be like condemning of anyone, even Donald Trump, right? It's just to look at it with an objective lens and be like, this is good, this is bad. He's just another man. In my eyes, whether he's an what Christ or anything, he's just a man.
Yeah, that's the perspective that Going actually gave me that I didn't have before. Because I've been susceptible to the conspiratorial, they're part of the Illuminati, they're part of bloodlines, they're part of these secret societies, and they're running our country. And going in person, and my father and I and my cousin, we actually got invited to go to the Kentucky Constituents Dinner. And we showed up and we were bumping shoulders with our congressman. And I talked to James Comer, who's heading the investigation into Biden's corruption. Of course, now it's just going to be a book because Biden pardoned everybody. But
except for himself.
I saw. Have you seen that meme? It's like Biden waking up in the morning after. He's like, oh. But that's what the perspective that I didn't have. That going actually being there at the event, bumping shoulders with these people actually gave me is these. It's almost scary. These are just guys.
Yeah.
Like, and when I realize that the people that are in charge of our country, in charge of millions of dollars of this or that, billions, trillions, and realizing that these are just people that maybe they're not hyper intelligent, slithering creatures that are in the skin of man, but they're actually just.
They're not reptilians. They're not satanic space lizards.
They still could be.
There goes my whole ministry.
Yes, because there's always a degree of truth, right? So there always could be that cult behind the scenes, and there likely is. But a lot of the people that you interact with on a government level, I think, are just people that are susceptible to the same sins and temptations we are. And those sins and temptations are what reverberate through our nation as they're tempted to fall into greed and fall into, whatever their own perversions are influencing their policies and the things they want to push on the world. And that's really the rippling effect from the government that we feel is just the susceptible nature of the individual who's in that position of power falling to their own sin and temptation, and then those consequences of their sin reverberating into affecting the gas price and the laws that are passed towards abortion, and that's really how I think on a day-to-day level these average Joes actually are affecting us. But that's with the caveat that there is likely also possibly
satanic space lizards.
I feel like obviously there's going to be people that are corrupt, behind the scenes. We don't even know who these people are, That being said, they're all, when we look at somebody like Donald Trump, even Joe Biden, right? he's just a man, and he's created in the image of our Creator still. So should we treat them any less different than I treat somebody that's not a famous politician? And my point is like they are, in my opinion, all equal. They may be in a position of power, but when we do that, when we have a negative lens on somebody just because they're in politics, well, then we've already judged them. We've already said that they're not worthy of salvation, or they're not. We act as if we know them personally, when some guy's just a regular dude, like you said. He's got a family, and you don't know what he does in the background. He may actually be an honest man in a horrible system, and there may be several of those, and there may be, like a few Daniels within the system, but
is it not written, "You shall not curse the leaders of your land"?
Yeah,
There's also that.
Yeah, and even though I don't agree with a lot of things that Biden does, I shouldn't have hate in my heart towards him. I shouldn't want. I should want the best. I should want everybody to get more and more like our Creator.
We should pray for those who are put into positions of authority above us, because the Most High ordains it all. And if we're cursing the guy who's gonna press the button to curse us, I don't know, it's kind of full circle, doesn't work out.
So when you went to, obviously there's going to be people that are going to disagree with everything that we say on both sides, whatever. But when you went to the inauguration, obviously there's Roman cultural things within the political system. And how do you navigate that? And what would you say in regard to that?
Oh, there's so much symbology in all of the different things that our country is built around the culture of America. And it's really interesting to see how much our capital is influenced by a mixture of the whole world's religions and faiths and credos and philosophies. I mean, you can look at the architecture. It's in our paintings. It's in the things on the up in the rotunda in the Capitol building that Trump was sworn under. That's not the biblical heaven. There's a bunch of Greek gods up there with George Washington and the apotheosis. And so whenever we look at our nation and all the things that have this, it's got this Christian veneer covering a festering pot of Babylonian mixture, and it's just really, when you're there and you experience it and you're seeing all these statues of gods and Minerva and, all these different things, the Washington Monument's a giant obelisk, and then you think, okay, the men who are leading us are up there claiming to follow God, and they're having these pastors come in and pray, and they're doing so in front of giant, what in the past were idols. Is this not the definition of a whoring culture that is in their heart, loving the other, loving the nation's ways, loving the mixture of the nations, and then with their mouth professing, I love the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob? And that's the troubling thing to see. So, there's a couple things that, people hyper-focused on, like the fact that Trump didn't put his hand on the Bible. And I think they're over-focusing on that when they're missing the point that they're literally being sworn in with all of these other underlying motives and stuff. We can't just hyper-focus on the fact he didn't put his hand on the Bible. There's a lot more going on under the surface in terms of the metaphor that our nation makes when we put leaders above us.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of, definitely, there's spiritual Rome, Egypt, Babylon. I kind of had this thought the other day that we were kind of in a place where, when Joseph was in Egypt, everything's great, right? But he still followed, obviously, he didn't eat with the Egyptians. They had a law, right? Because it mentions that in Scripture. So it's not something he fought against. He just accepted it and went along with it. So the reason I bring that up, I think we're kind of in that transition of intra-Joseph, when he was there in Egypt, and then he's passed away, and you're in this kind of unknown territory of what's going to happen. Is it all good, all bad? Is it going to be a mixture of both? And so definitely there's a lot of symbolism. That's why I wanted to ask you, because you were there and you see all the traditions that go into it, and sometimes they put those things on pedestals, like it's got to be, the inauguration's got to be the exact way, or it's got, all people noticing, oh, you didn't put your hand on the Bible. It's like, does that matter? And there are people probably there, they're just ignorant to all of that. It's just something that's been going on forever, and they've never questioned it. And it's hard for a lot of people to go, okay, and navigate and to back away from that. And
I think my final thought on what I witnessed was I saw a lot of pride in overcoming the obstacle of the left, and a pride that Donald Trump made it in, and a pride that he is now doing the things he's promised, and a pride. And I think this is the time where, because we've accomplished this big goal of putting him into office, that people naturally are going to relax. They're going to stop paying attention. They're going to...
Everything's okay now.
Everything's okay. He made it. And that's the worst thing you could do, because it's during this time that, we have to be the most alert, because Satan doesn't come as the devil with the pitchfork. He comes as an angel of light. And we saw, back in 2020, Project Warp Speed and a lot of things that happened under Trump's administration that were very bad. And because he was involved in it, it was almost
like it's good. It's okay because he did it. And it's dangerous. That's why you got to be cautious and call them out. You got to hold people accountable no matter what positions of power they're in. Obviously, you don't condemn them and curse them. But at the same time, it's not wrong to be like, I disagree with this. It's not biblical, or it's not scriptural, and he's not. And obviously, this system is not completely, there may be people who have, like you were talking about the other day, with Puritan influence, but then there's obviously the worldly Babylon influence. And so it is really hard to navigate.
What about Elon Musk? Because that is somebody who I have my eye.
Can we air that?
I really do. I have my eye closely on Elon Musk. I do not see. I don't perceive good things coming from Elon Musk. I'll just say that.
I think he's intelligent. And even if I agree with him on the principles of freedom of speech, right? Like free speech and not...
But not paid speech.
Right. It's all comes down to what you said a minute ago, pride. And that is our biggest downfall as man, is pride. And when you get in positions of power like that, absolute power, they say, corrupts. Absolutely, yeah. And so I don't know, I'm not going to come out and be like, oh, he's the Antichrist, or they go crazy, because there's a lot of people who, they immediately want to make an accusation and put him in a category. I'm not going to put any of them in a category.
Yeah.
Because they're just man, right? And Yah's prophecies are going to be fulfilled regardless of what what's going to happen is going to happen. I don't see him as no one should look at him as a spiritual or emotional or like a moral leader of the country. None of them. None of them are. You know what
Certainly
I mean? And that's what they become, that though, when you put them on a pedestal.
Yeah.
Because you will change your morals, or you will cross lines that you may not have crossed yourself just because someone else did it. And you're like, well, it must be okay because Elon says it. So.
Sure. Well, so the reason I bring that up is because I've seen some recent videos, and they're pretty compelling as far as giving a compilation of some of his track record. You see him with the upside down cross, the Baphomet shoulder piece.
Didn't he like dress up something crazy for Halloween?
That's what. That's what it was. But I mean, that's not nothing, right? And and then to go and name his rockets like Dragon, and he's in. From my worldview, and I know this isn't a topic we're getting on today, but he's a liar because he's not sending things into outer space. He's operating a fraudulent business, and he's naming his rocket ships Dragon, that are ascending into the heights of the firmament.
People, I mean,
I think that Donald Trump may be a smokescreen for Elon Musk, and I'm not
or anybody around it. Like,
yeah, there's a lot of sleight of hand. If you see something on the main stage, there's likely something going on in the other hand.
That always happens with anybody who's been in power, though. Like, if there's a distraction, like a disaster event that happens, then Congress is like usually passing something, like, I mean,
sure,
look over here while we do this.
Right. And
I just wanted to throw that out there.
I think people think all these symbolic things. Also, he could be really ignorant. He could be that ignorant in that. Like, so do I believe that people who are partaking in things that we would call evil or just bad in general, are they knowingly doing it, not on a moral level, but like on a, like, he calls it dragon, right? But is he doing it because he's like, oh, I'm a devil worshiper and I'm doing this on purpose, or he just thinks those things are cool and it's culturally cool, and so he does these things just because, but it's all still kind of going with prophecy that all these things are going to happen because.
I'm not trying to sit on the seat as the judge for him, so like I'm not.
Yeah, I'm just I think it's.
But I'm just pointing it out, and like I said, the Founded Earth Brothers did a great video on it. That it's, if nothing else, it's interesting. It's just interesting.
He definitely has some interesting parallels with ancient Babylon, being like a very Nimrod-like figure, and let's go through a couple of the parallels. He is a figure who owns X, which was Twitter. So that's a communication platform, and his whole recent push for freedom of speech is a reversal in a way of the curse of the Tower of Babel, where the whole nation, 70 nations were split and their languages were confused and communication breakdown happened. Well, what is Elon Musk doing? He is reversing the curse of the separated communication. And he's bringing people together with the platform of X. Not only that, he's very similar in the fact that he's ascending to the heavens, just as Nimrod wanted to build a Tower of Babel to get up into the heavens. Elon's accomplishing it with his SpaceX program. With SpaceX, you have some interesting parallels with even prophetic Book of Revelation language, where there was the false prophet had power to bring fire down from the heavens. And what is Elon Musk? I might be misspeaking. It might not be the false prophet. It might be the beast. The beast. So the beast has power to bring fire down from the heavens. What is Elon doing? He's the only person in the world right now with his company that can capture rockets out of the sky, fire caught from heaven. And then you have his involvement in AI and the advancement of humans into transhumanism, with the aspect of recently the billions and billions of dollars that are promised to go towards supercomputer AI general intelligence, and using that general intelligence to unlock the human genome to be able to create designer vaccines that can cure cancer and other diseases in a 48-hour turnaround, is what the guy was promising.
I'm more suspicious about those types of things.
Right? My goodness.
Yeah, that's. And none of us are saying, oh, he's the Antichrist. We're not even trying to say prophetically.
We're just saying the parallels.
We're just saying that in culture, in today's society, like, none of us are saying what is and what isn't. It's just a discussion, But this happens almost every generation with someone,
Yeah, we all have our
every 4 years at least, yeah.
And I'm for one am not a huge conspiracy guy. Like I some are true, but I think obviously some are even the ones that are true can still be a distraction, right? If that's my only 100%. Focus. And we can be focused on who is who, and stop worrying about, well, who should I be and what should I be doing? I'm still worried about who Elon Musk and who he isn't. That's my only focus, And then on the other side, there's things are just not true that I believe that they are also psyops created by Hasatan that can, because we're so easily convinced of conspiracies that almost anything oh, it's got to be true, and we chase things that have no fruit to our walk. So,
and everybody's looking for the Antichrist and the mark of the beast. No one's so few
how about
people
the mark of God? How about the mark of
right.
Yah?
Why not look for Yah's mark, and why not look for Messiah?
All those people, that's going to be what's going to be. You know what?
It's so easy for people to get jaded in terms of prophetic burnout, but I think the important thing to not forget is that our forefathers and our ancestors that all experienced antichrists likely were experiencing antichrist, because there's a prophetic repeating pattern
It's a
throughout
spirit,
time.
right? It's a
There are
spirit.
many
Antichrist, and it's
Many,
not like
yes.
it's not like saying that Elon Musk himself is going to be this all-powerful being that does all these things.
I think that's interesting that Elon is been put into the head of the Department of Government Efficiency while also being this AI connoisseur. So you have to assume that to make the government efficient, he's going to plug and play the numbers into AI, and AI is going to tell him what to do, because AI can crunch how to make the government more efficient. And this is the closest we've gotten to the Terminator, guys. Like,
Skynet has become
it is.
Come with me if you want to live.
Oh man, so
It's interesting.
We're paying attention.
I don't trust AI in general, because if any movie has taught you anything, it's that they're all evil and they're going to kill us all. They're going to become self-aware. Skynet has become self-aware. So anyways, I guess that's ends it for today. It was a good discussion. Do you is there anything that you want to share again that you may have forgot about your future endeavors, as well as you, just in general?
Okay, yeah. You guys be lookout for the song. I actually got some amazing music video footage in my time in DC. It's called Procrastinating Prophets. Music video will be hitting very soon, as well as it'll be on Spotify. That's with Simply Prodigal and Sincere for Yah. And also, if you guys are interested in board games, check out my board game at tribethegame.net. And it's a fun, biblical-based kind of take on poker and chess, and I got a couple copies left, so if anybody wants to get a game for their family to play, check out tribethegame.net.
We'll try to put all the things that we've discussed as far as like with links in the description box. Anything?
So Lucia and we're running a t-shirt subscription model right now on SanctifiedSupplyCo.com. So we're putting out new products every month, new designs, and so that's kind of been our focus recently.
Promo code Crush the Head will get you 10% off if they got some awesome for anybody, believers want to look at some faith-based t-shirts. Check them out. Thanks for watching, and as always,
Crush the head.
Crush the head.